Our grandparents were all entrepreneurs. They were fishermen, they were bakers, and they were all entrepreneurs. And then we sort of got lost, and we started looking for jobs. Are we going full circle?
Well, we still have daily entrepreneurs. I mean, in economics and in development economics in particular, there's a distinction between forced and unforced entrepreneurship, voluntary and involuntary entrepreneurship. And the idea there is that a lot of what we are calling entrepreneurship isn't really entrepreneurship. It's just sort of subsistence. I can't find a job, so I open a small tea store like those guys in there. I think in this book, I'm sort of more concerned about how do you take change that makes life measurably better, but do it at scale. Because again, I'm sort of very conscious. I just crossed 50, and if I want to make enough change by the time I'm 70, that's not a whole lot of time left. So we can think in large bite sizes of tens of millions of people. That would be nice. I think that's what's different.
You speak about ambient trust.
Yes.
What does that actually mean?
So there's a political scientist, I forget where he's at now, Fukuyama, who wrote a book called Trust many years ago, 30 years ago. And in that he observed, accurately but not to my mind very helpfully, in that he observed that in some societies people trust each other, and other societies they just don't. And then the rest of the book was speculation on why that had happened, some confidence of history. So ambient trust refers to I guess the idea that, as I say in the beginning of my book, that I can leave my garage door open or my front door open in the city that I live in Newton, and nobody's going to walk in ever. Nobody's going to care. I couldn't do that in Mumbai.
One of the theses that I put up there was that trust could be the future currency. Mm-hmm. Can we actually make that into a currency? In other words, measure trust? You measure it in different ways. So, for example, in the world of fake news, mm-hmm. real news from a real editor, mm-hmm. we are at higher trust level. Mm-hmm. We can give that journalist a trust point. Similarly, in business, we had this in social, in microfinance and so on. So there were a lot of trust-based relationships.
Absolutely.
Can that be a currency, and can we start trading it, and can you put a Bitcoin in there and create a cryptocurrency around trust?
So I love it when people shout blockchain whenever anything is changing. By the way, to the kids, Kareem, actually, my colleague, knows a lot about blockchain. He's going to talk a lot about it tomorrow or day after, in our course. Can I do an aside for a second? Please. I met the coolest guy a few months ago in one of these World Economic Forum meetings, and we're going to do a session on that with the kids tomorrow, using blockchain to save the Amazon, right? And the idea basically is to, and I'm working with him very closely to help him realize it. But the idea is that, look, the Amazon is getting deforested at a rapid rate. The Amazon is the lungs for the world. So if you do that, it's going to have devastating effect on climate change. And the reason it's getting deforested is that the people who live in the Amazon don't see any value to the diversity around it. They'd rather just cut the trees and grow some crops and so on. So how can we get them to get value from the biodiversity? Now, the rest of the world recognizes the value of biodiversity. That's why you've all big pharma and consumer products and Colgate and what have you rushing in there, grabbing stuff and not compensating the locals for the biodiversity. So this wacky guy's idea is, if I can digitize the genome of every living entity in the Amazon, okay? So far, we think that we have digitized 0.2% of the genomes of what's called eukaryotes, which are species that have defined nuclei, right? And that's only a subset of all living things, 0.2%. So if we can get to close to 100%, then anybody who takes anything will have a way to write a smart contract, the way you do with blockchains, so that there would be a prayer of getting, of the Amazonians trusting that somebody would compensate them for their natural bounty, and then they would preserve it, and then we wouldn't have global warming. It's a massively mad idea. That's why I love it. And so we're working on it. But we've got the World Economic Forum, we've got all the world banks lined up, got a bunch of banks, This is his idea. It's not my idea. I'm just kind of one of the people pushing him. But on trust, I mean, your issue of measuring trust, I don't know about measuring trust and trust itself as a currency, but the idea that trust has value that is measurable, that's well established. There are plenty of instances when both well established, both in an anecdotal sense. We know that trustworthy businesses in this part of the world and in my countries, any developing country, will automatically get paid a premium for their product because people will know that they're there for the long haul, they're reliable, they won't cheat, etc. They won't cut corners. But that's not trust as a currency. That's measuring the effects of trust. And it's also been shown in very many econometric statistical studies. The currency part, I don't know.
It's worth thinking about.
Flexible enough. Yeah.
It's worth thinking about because I think if we can start creating news, for example, and each news item, you buy that one news item because today we have search,
Sure.
and search is a boring word search.
Yep.
And now we can go in terms of quality and trust and how much do I trust this particular journalist.
Right.
So there is a value to that particular piece of information. So therefore we are paying for trust in some ways. I beg your pardon? Trust is not true. Now we're getting very philosophical.
Yes. He's saying that you're equating trust with truth, and that's not necessary. So I agree with that. No, I agree with that.
How do you, so the final question, and I'll open it up a couple of points, and then we'll wrap up, because I think we are challenged for time. These young people, how do you teach them trust? How do you teach them to trust? How do you trust them? How do they evaluate trust?
So today we had a,
it's just a platitude.
No, I agree with you. I think it's very difficult. Very difficult. Part of my wanting to write this book was to get some real stories out there where you can see the concrete sort of bottom line implications of somebody fostering trust in a small attempt to build the momentum towards it. I was going to say that today we had, those who have been in my classes will know that I spent a lot of time working with this heart surgeon in India who has pioneered the lowest cost heart surgery over the last 10, 15 years. A guy named Devi Shetty in Bangalore, really rock star, scientist, entrepreneur, heart surgeon, philanthropist. We got to working together partly because both of us are do-goody types. Right? We want to do good. And I don't mind leaving a buck on the table as long as I can have a small cut. I don't mind leaving a buck on the table for the rest of society. And Devi's like that too. So a lot of the kids were struggling with it today and saying, oh, but why does the doctor agree to do that? Why not raise the price? Why not charge more? And these are good questions. These are legitimate questions. In a sense, they were struggling with why is somebody kind of, there's an English movie called Pay It Forward. But the idea is that you give back, and sooner or later, and we all have proverbs in our own countries that sound roughly similar. You give back, and somehow the world gives it back to you eventually, right? And there was a movie along that, and in a way, I actually deeply believe it. I find that the more I help people around it, the more they come back and they do stuff with me. I mean, Crossroads is an example of that, right? It's not really my brainchild. I mean, it's free writing on Ghulam and the HBS clubs and all the folks in Dubai, but the academic idea came from Karim Lakhani and myself, saying that wouldn't it be great to just trigger all this, and I'm sure it would be great for us eventually also. I have no idea how it'll be great for us.
Which was the butterfly effect we were talking about.
Yeah, how can it not be? How can it not? So I don't know whether there's a suspension of disbelief or something for a little while, or the luxury of being able to wing it and see what happens. I'm not sure.
Are there any absolutely burning questions? Because I'm getting the look now, the really hard look. Thank you very much indeed, Tarun.
So
Put a big hand for Tarun.
Thank you very much.
And everybody gets the book. I've just started reading it. I'm already enjoying it and learning a huge amount. And I hope all of us can do. It's been a real honor and privilege. Thank you very much, sir.